I really want to talk about diabetes this morning, and talk about why are we all of a sudden seeing more people being diagnosed with diabetes?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I believe it is from the food we eat, lack of exercise, toxins in our environment, that most of us are sugar burners.
You're missing one. You're missing one important key thing.
Well, bring it to us, Doc.
Yeah, you're missing one key important thing that's changed in the last. If you look at from the 1990 to the year 2010, we saw diabetes going down. The number of cases of diabetes was going down. They said that it was actually down by 68%.
Down by 68%.
Between 1990 and 2010, so in that 20-year period.
Well, they couldn't have that. So what did they change?
So why all of a sudden are we seeing the numbers going back up?
Tell me.
About 10 years ago.
Tell me. Tell me.
Well, I want you to guess. Come on.
I did. I guessed 5 different things.
Okay. Well, that's true too. We've started eating more bad food and things like that. But I think, based on what I'm reading, insurance.
Insurance.
Insurance. It radically changed. It radically changed around that same time frame, didn't it?
Well, tell me about that.
Well, all of a sudden we saw that people had higher deductibles, they had higher pays, and so what did they do? What was their response to having higher deductibles and higher copays?
Well, I don't know what they did nationwide, but here in Michigan, they mandated that you had to cover people for insulin and other diabetic things.
Yeah. So what happened around that time frame is that the cost of insurance went up. People started noticing that they had higher deductibles, so they quit going to the doctor because they didn't want to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
Their premiums went up, their copays went up, their deductibles went up, and so the response of Americans was, let's quit going to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Where the doctors, the medical association, whoever you want to, put credit to, they had made it so that people were having, they were going to the doctor, they were getting diagnosed early, and they were making the necessary changes so that they didn't get diagnosed. They got diagnosed early so they can make the changes so they wouldn't have the problems.
Well, back in the early, like around 2000 to 2005, that's why a lot of preventative healthcare got written into insurance. So people would actually go in and get things checked out and catch it before it got bad.
Yep. And all of a sudden you have an increased copay. I mean, I went from having, this deductible to this deductible. I went from having no copay to having a $50 per visit copay. Cost of insurance went up. Mine went up 3 times. And people quit going to the doctor. That's the response. So that's been what some researchers are now saying is the major spike. Because why all of a sudden when we had it under control, we were seeing a significant drop in the number of cases of diabetes. All of a sudden we saw it going on. Okay. So now let's talk about diabetes. Like you said, what causes it? Well, it's caused by diet, lack of exercise. As we move to a more world run by artificial intelligence and technology, we live more sedentary lifestyles.
Right.
People don't have to work as hard as they used to do. So what happens is that sugar doesn't get burnt up. It gets stored, there's supposed to be 4 grams floating around in your blood at any given time in a 150-pound person.
Okay.
It's maintained, that homeostasis is maintained by the body, by the liver. And hang on one second here. I'm just going to stop that chair because we don't need that anymore. But so we're seeing that homeostasis is now being messed up, and the sugar is stored in the body by as glycogen in the muscles and in the liver cells. But because we're not burning the sugar as energy, what happens is that the sugar is floating around the bloodstream, where your insulin produced by the pancreas is supposed to control that homeostasis. Is supposed to keep it at the normal level. Fasting blood sugar, they give an 8-hour fasting. It's supposed to be less than 126, and really optimum is somewhere around 80 to 90.
Okay.
But what happens is that when you have this blood sugar that's elevated, a lot of the time, what ends up happening is the body doesn't respond to the insulin. So insulin keeps pumping into the system. The pancreas keeps producing all of this insulin, and the muscles and the liver cells don't listen to the insulin anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So blood sugar keeps going up.
And then doesn't that like wear out your pancreas too?
Eventually, the cells of the pancreas start getting what they call senescent,
Aha.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that the last 2 weeks, haven't we?
Right.
So it's interesting how all of this stuff kind of comes around.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the symptoms of having too much high blood sugar?
Weight gain, I think.
Weight gain,
A lot of urination.
increased urination,
Maybe neuropathy in your legs.
neuropathy, yep. But even before some of those, you start feeling tired a lot. You just don't seem to have the energy that you used to have. You're more thirsty. You drink more. You have dry, itchy skin. You're hungry. You might have blurred vision.
Okay.
Those are some of the early signs. And then as you get further along, then you get kidney disease. You have strokes. You have heart attack, blindness. The immune system doesn't seem to function as good. Erectile dysfunction, neuropathy, circulation, decreased wound healing. Like if you notice that you cut yourself and it just doesn't seem to heal, you might start thinking you might have blood sugar problems.
Okay.
So in the studies, I took some notes here. In the studies in the 90s, they found that if you had diabetes, it increased your risk of a sudden fatal heart attack by 3.7 times.
Wow.
You increased your risk of kidney failure by 14 times.
14 times.
14 times, yeah. You increased your risk of lower extremity amputation by 18.8 times the normal risk.
Yeah, I have a friend who had his leg taken off last summer.
So now what we're seeing that that all this work that doctors and the healthcare system had been doing, it's all been sabotaged, really. And we're seeing increased amputations. We're seeing increased emergency room visits due to blood sugar problems. We're seeing increased hospitalization. And they're showing that the death rate due to complications of hyperglycemia has gone up by 55% since 2010.
Wow. These percentages are crazy.
Right? I mean, this is why I want to talk about this morning. When I was reading through some of these journals this morning, I grabbed this off of different journals off the internet, plus some that are mailed to me. And, we talked about like weight issues. You were talking about weight. They're saying now in America that obesity is an epidemic. 42% of Americans are obese. They're saying by the year 2030, in the next 10 years, that's going to be close to 50%. It's going to go up another 10%. And another 10% of the population. It's not going to go up by 10%, it's going to go up by another 10% of the population.
Wow.
That's huge. And they're saying 32% of the population is overweight. So that means 74% of the population is obese or overweight. Meaning that 25%
Well, you know, you
people-
can go to any park or mall or beach and look around and you can see that. I mean, there's evidence everywhere.
Yep. So I looked up in the Journal of the American Medical Association, you know, why is there more diabetes? And they, of course, they said increased body weight, failure to control the fats, the type of fats in your blood, blood pressure, and then they're the ones. This was actually from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Stagnation in preventative care due to insurance costs.
Wow, it's right in there, huh?
In a Journal of the American Medical Association. So they're saying, here was their quote. I want to read their quote. After encouraging reduction in hemoglobin A1C in patients with diabetes throughout the 2000s, year of the 2000s, the population of people with that mostly have the HbA1c problems is starting to go up.
Well, you know, the good news about that is we can turn it around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to turn it around by making people aware of it.
Right.
Also, getting people to understand. And so all this regulatory burden that we're putting on society, increased costs, insulin costs have gone up, medical costs have gone up, preventative care costs have gone up. And the cornerstone to keeping this under control is really prevention, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, you meet people that you know, the two main factors of what you eat and how much you lack exercise. You meet people who turn that around by changing their diet and getting more exercise.
Right. Yeah. We just got to get people more aware of it, right? So here's a study. This was kind of a study, right? We're busy talking about senescent cells. I like, and it's included in a lot of the studies now that talk about senescence, right? And
Yeah.
so in one study, they took people that had kidney disease caused by diabetes, right? Kidney disease caused by diabetes. It's a common problem,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they did 3 days of treatment for senescence. They used senolytic activators, different senolytic activators. In this case, they used dasatinib and quercetin, which is a chemo drug and a natural therapeutic. And they found that after 3 days of treatment, then they took them off the treatment. 11 days later, they measured the amount of senescent cells in the kidneys based on senescent cell markers and adipose tissue macrophages, which are white blood cells that are activated by senescent cells. And they found a significant reduction in the amount of
Wow. Yay!
these cells.
That's
Yeah.
great news.
So for people who have just joined us, for people that maybe aren't familiar with senescence, right? Senescence is when a cell, it's aged or it's somehow been damaged. It doesn't go through the normal process that's called apoptosis. That's a normal process that your body uses to get rid of aging and damaged cells. It causes them to go through cellular suicide. And these senescent cells, they resist that normal apoptosis and they survive. And their only function is to cause inflammation and death in non-senescent cells.
That's their function, huh?
That's their function.
That's horrible.
They cause this cytokine reaction, right? Which we've heard of.
Yeah. Everybody's learning about that, right?
Everybody's learning about this cytokine storm, right?
Yeah.
Cells create cytokine, the cytokine storm.
Yep.
Senescent cells, right? So one of the things that I was reading about was that if we can take and we can go after this essence right here. Let me kind of cruise through my notes here. I want to show this. Where did I write that down? Oh.
Well, the good news is that, we're learning about senescent cells and we're coming out with natural ways to take care of them. That's going to create a lot of health improvement for a lot of different things.
Yeah. So they're saying if we can get rid of these, I wrote some notes on it, but I can't find it in my notes here. But if we can get that under control, if we can treat the diseases of aging as the disease, right? Sorry, my computer's on my table and it's loud. But if we can treat the aging diseases, we can get a lot of this stuff under control.
Right.
What are the complications of diabetes, right? You don't die of diabetes. What do you die from?
All the side effects of it.
The side effects, heart disease and kidney disease and infections. Right?
Yeah, infections, a lot of people.
So if we look at the diseases caused by senescence, which you and I talked about the last couple of weeks, right? We're very familiar with this because we've talked about it. We've shared it on the last 2 calls. Heart disease is one. Atherosclerosis disease.
Yep.
And type 2 diabetes.
Yep.
Because you can't take and keep dumping all this sugar into the system without causing damage to the cells. And when you cause damage to the cells go into senescence.
Yep. And then they give off toxins. So it's a big vicious circle.
Right? And again, senescent cells, their only function in life is to damage the healthy cells.
Well, we want to get rid of those.
You want to get rid of those. And so that's what all this stuff is saying. So they're saying, not only this is from the New England Journal of Medicine, right? I pulled this out of the New England Journal of Medicine this morning. They're saying by 2030, the cost of treating America's obesity problem is going to go up to $446 billion a year.
Wow, billion.
Right? And that increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, and 13 different types of cancer.
Well, not only that, but this increase of obesity has other effects on our society because these people don't feel well. They don't feel healthy. They don't have energy. They don't feel like producing. They don't feel like creating things. I think a lot of people who are overweight are more depressed. I mean, it's a whole change we have to do in society. Not just drug it up or something. It's got to be fixed. It can't just be covered up.
Plus, they're saying that obesity causes 20% of the deaths in the United States. I don't know if you pay attention when you go to the grocery store, but do you watch all these people running around picking up soda? I mean, carts full of Mountain Dew, and they're staying at home and they're drinking all this Mountain Dew and they're drinking. I'm not picking on you, Pepsi. If you're listening, if you're listening to my call, I'm not picking on you. Coca-Cola is just as bad. Right?
Well, yeah, I often, when I'm going around the grocery store, looking in other people's carts to see what they're buying, and it's pretty amazing.
So if you drink 2 or more regular sodas a day, you increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 43%.
43%. Good morning, Rennie. 43%. And here's the other thing about that. If you're drinking the diet, you're getting tons of chemicals your body doesn't need. If you're drinking the sugar, that lowers your immune system by 5 to 6 hours after you drink 1 soda with sugar in it.
So you're talking about, I was going to get into the diet soda. So if you're drinking 2 more diet sodas, you increase your risk of type 2 diabetes by 21%. Even though it has no sugar in it, it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. They're calling it obesogenic effects. Obesogenic effects. Why? Because it changes the gut microbiome.
Oh, yeah, right. We've talked about that.
Right. So then I started looking at, I'm trying to tie all this stuff together. There's a spider web here, right?
Yeah.
Together. And hey, I remember way back in the early 90s in the local newspaper in the Fargo Forum, there was a headline and it showed a fat kid on the cover of the Fargo Forum. And the title of the article was, "Why is childhood obesity such a problem? Why are we having such a problem?" This was in the 1990s.
Right? We've got it worse now.
I'm just going to sum up their article because I still remember it 30 years later. And their article basically said, scientists can't figure it out.
Okay.
And so I wrote a letter to the editor, and my letter to the editor said, well, it's because of all the sugar. Summed up my letter. And then I got a letter back from the president. He wrote back a counterpoint to my letter to the editor, and his letter to the editor from the president of the Mindak Sugar Cooperative.
Don't tell us it's the sugar.
Dr. Fisnick, he said, "You're a great chiropractor, but you don't know shit about nutrition." He said, "Sugar's good for you."
No. Oh my word. It's
Sorry
like
about my
poison.
language. But that's what he said. And I'm just, I look back and I still remember it, because I just thought, where is that guy now? I wonder where he is.
Probably had a heart attack.
Oh, yeah, right, from diabetes. Probably had his legs amputated. But, they say that 60% of our diet in the United States is made up of processed food and ultra processed food. They're saying that some food is so processed, this is what they call ultra processed. They're saying that it doesn't even resemble food in any way at all. There's nothing in it that resembles anything from food.
Yeah, it's not even real food. There's nothing there. It's like filler. It's like cheap dog food and they put sawdust in it. It's like the sawdust.
Yeah, well, sawdust is probably healthy for you. It's the other
Probably better than what they're putting in there, for sure.
So they're saying that if you increase your processed food from 1.5 servings a day to 5.3 servings per day, which is kind of the average, it increases your risk of all causes of mortality by 62%.
These percentages are crazy.
Isn't this some crazy numbers? And
this is good information.
So if you increase your serving from 5.3 to more, for each additional serving of ultra-processed food, it increases your risk of all-cause mortality by 18% for each meal, each serving.
Wow, that makes you want to buy organic, natural, raw food.
I mean, Andrea, I'm looking up these numbers and I'm just going, holy cow, this is crazy. This is crazy, right? And so what can be done? What can be done? That's probably what we want to spend most of our time on now. What can be done? Because people, for those of you that are listening to the call, obviously you're going, wow, those numbers are huge. What can we do?
Yeah, right.
Well, first thing, cut out the processed food. Get rid of the ultra processed food. Number one.
Look that up. Google that. Google ultra processed food. Figure it out.
If it comes in a can or a box or whatever or a bag, it's processed.
Yeah, you shouldn't hardly be shopping.
While we're sitting at home and we're being quarantined and things like that, it's hard to have a refrigerator full of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Right.
So I do have some canned foods here. I do have some frozen foods. But I try and get as much as I can that's low processed. Yeah,
they say if you shop the edges of a grocery store, you're doing much better than shopping in the middle, because that's where all the processed food is.
That's right. But, we look back at our parents and our grandparents, I remember my mom used to have like a pantry full of canned fruits and vegetables that she canned herself, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we have to go back to.
Yeah, maybe.
So anyhow, diet is really, really important. That's gonna be your number one thing. Getting exercise. I mean, if you can get, really based on what I'm reading, if you can get 40 minutes of exercise a day.
Yeah, and walking is one of the best exercises that you can do. Get out and walk.
Walking.
It helps your intestines work better. You get that movement. You get your spinal fluid flowing, things like that.
And lifting weights, because you want to build muscle, because it's building the lean muscle that burns the sugar. So cardiovascular walk and things like that's great, but lifting weights, building muscle, tearing it up, right? Remember the talk that we gave about 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, where we showed the study from the National Institute of Aging, where they showed that if you're not building muscle, your brain decides that you're dying.
Yeah.
And so you get dementia as a result of it. You get Alzheimer's. Why are we talking about that on this call? Well, because it's been termed type 3 diabetes.
Right. It has.
It has. So I wrote down kind of my list of preventative type blood tests that you can get done, right?
Okay.
I think these are blood tests that you should have done once a year, right?
Okay.
And I just got in. I think that your panel, your Chem 20 panel, we used to call it, right, which is your blood chemistry, is your CBC, your lipid panels, right? It doesn't really give any functional type tests, but it tells you if there's already damage.
Okay. Could you state those again?
So that's like your normal blood chemistry panel. You know, we used to call it like the 20 panel, and then you do 20 blood tests. They do the blood lipids, the blood sugar. They do the CBC. All those things.
Okay.
White cells, red blood cells, the hemoglobin, all those things. I think that if you have that done every year, it can detect if there's something going wrong. It's a cheat. Insulin, fasting insulin is a great test to have done. A lot of doctors don't test that, but I think it's a good test because it can determine if you're developing insulin resistance really early.
Okay.
HbA1c, right? Hemoglobin A1c. What that is that's the measure of glycated sugars, right? And we know what's glycation.
That's a buildup of gunk in your cells.
Yeah, it's from burning sugar as energy, right? And you create sugar coating on your cells. It's like putting glazing on your donut.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Except you're putting glazing on your cell. And so, what vitamins can help lower the HbA1c? Magnesium.
Magnesium.
Vitamin D. Right? Exercise, diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, in my opinion, it's the best way to screen for a glucose problem because your glucose changes all the time. Remember, you got this homeostasis, but it changes. If I eat, if I have celery, it's going to be different, right? If I eat beans versus eating a donut, it's even though it might be the same amount of calories, it's going to change the sugar because one digests faster than the other, increases the blood sugar due to glycemic index. So the HbA1c is actually a better measure than the blood glucose levels.
Okay.
Yeah, so get that right. DHEA is another important test that you should have run on an annual basis because.
What is that? Say that one again.
DHEA.
DHEA.
Yep.
Dog, hot, elephant, apple.
Right. That's really what it stands for.
Really? A hot elephant?
Hot elephant.
Eating apples. We can remember that.
Hot elephant apple.
I'll give you a mental peg. A dog chasing a hot elephant eating apples.
That's right. And according to the American Heart Association that if you have low levels of DHEA, it increases your risk of overall any cause death rate, and increases if you have an increase in your DHEA, it lowers your risk of falling when you get elderly.
Really?
Yeah, so it's really important. PSA test in men, of course, for prostate. Homocysteine levels, increased levels are involved with increased risk of heart disease, bone fractures, macular degeneration, as well as neurodegenerative problems, right? B vitamins are the ones that you want to use for lowering homocysteine, B2, B6, B12. C-reactive protein, CRP, you've heard of that one?
Yep.
It's a measure of chronic inflammation associated with all chronic disease, right? We've talked about that. One of the primary things that you see with chronic disease is inflammation. So C-reactive protein is related to that. It's a highly sensitive test, and it measures inflammation throughout the whole body. And so when you have increased levels of C-reactive protein, CRP, you have increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of macular degeneration. How do you lower it?
Tell me. What'd you say?
Fish oil.
Fish oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
And olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil. And I want to talk a little bit about that too. But magnesium, zinc, and vitamin D are also great ways to lower the C-reactive protein. I'm looking at the time here. I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit, okay?
Yeah, but this is great
I'd
information.
rather talk faster than skip it. So the TSH test, the thyroid stimulating hormone, is produced by the pituitary gland. It controls your thyroid, and really, really important test. I think the test that you should have run every year. Selenium. I got my testing kit laying right over here. I actually was going to get all this stuff tested last week after my birthday, but I didn't because I don't want to go into the clinic right now.
Good idea.
Selenium, vitamin A, vitamin B12, iodine, magnesium, ashwagandha, L-tyrosine, which is an amino acid. They all help with your TSH levels, which helps with your thyroid levels, right? Prevent thyroid disease. You want to measure testosterone because they found that as we get older, by the age of 75, they're saying that men are going to have a 60% decrease in amount of testosterone. And they found that it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, as well as metabolic syndrome.
It's amazing how,
And progesterone. It increases your risk of, when you have decreased levels, it increases your risk of osteoporosis and bone fractures, as well as certain types of cancer. Apolipoprotein, ApoB, they call it, ApoB. It's a component of LDL, in which is low density lipoproteins and very low density lipoprotein. Those are the bad cholesterols. So you want to see this ApoB test being down, because when it's up, it increases your risk of cardiovascular disease and strokes and atherosclerosis, right? And again, atherosclerosis, we talked about that last week, didn't we? When we talked about the week before. Senescence. It's related to senescent cells, because when the cells of the lining of the arteries start getting senescent, they start to die. And what's the function of a senescent cell?
yeah, to give off toxins and kill off all the cells around it.
To kill off the healthy cells. That's the only function in your body. Vitamin D. You want to get your vitamin D levels, because not only is it associated with longevity, they found that we have a 40% of the population in America is deficient in vitamin D levels.
Yeah, I've heard that's high. I think a lot of people are confused about vitamin D because isn't it oil? It's an oil soluble vitamin. And so you'd want to get a really good quality, and then you have to know how much to take, right?
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, like right now, while we're going through this pandemic, I started out, I bumped my levels up to 20,000 units a day. And then after 3 months of that, I dropped it down to 10,000 units a day.
Okay.
But yeah, because it's involved with the immune system. It's involved with autoimmune diseases. I remember back in the 1990s when I went to these different medical symposiums, they found that it was related to multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, I know
Take a
people
look
who
at a
have.
map, right? And you look at a map, let's say this is the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Down closer to the southern border, you had less multiple sclerosis than you did up here. And I remember some of my patients would go down to Mexico for a month vacation and they'd come back and they'd say, oh man, I don't know why my multiple sclerosis didn't bother me as much when I was down in Mexico. And then when they got back here to North Dakota, it came back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a link. There's a link, folks. Magnesium. They're showing that in the United States, 65% of people are deficient in magnesium.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's really high. And you
It
want to
increases-
get good quality magnesium too, not just a
Right, you want to have a magnesium
$3 bottle.
And they're showing that in the elderly, that deficiency goes up to 80%.
Yeah, and this just
Crazy
rolls
stuff,
right
isn't it?
back. This rolls right back around to the fact that our foods nowadays are deficient in all these minerals and vitamins compared to 50 years ago.
Yeah. So when we aren't getting these vitamins and nutrients and things like that, what's happening is that your body does this, is that it goes through a certain process and the biological processes are taking place and it gets to a certain stage and let's say it needs selenium.
Okay.
It gets that process. What does it do? When it gets to the process and it needs selenium, but you don't have enough selenium.
I would imagine it starts a cascade effect of other things.
The biological process just stops.
Ah,
How can it go on? It doesn't have any selenium in it.
right.
What if it's magnesium? What if it's vitamin B12? All these different things, right? And so then what you're going to have is like all of a sudden you're going to start having all these problems start to develop and senescent cells start to develop. This is one study that I was reading on senescence this morning. They said in bone, when you have senescent cells that accumulate in the bone, it causes inflammation in the bone and it causes a decreased rate of bone formation, which increases your risk of bone fractures. Right?
So maybe that's been the problem all along, right?
So when we take a look again, let's talk about senescence. Let's wrap this spider web together, right?
Okay.
When you're 45, they say that 60% of your cells, your stem cells have gone into senescence. By the time you're 75, they're saying that 95% of your stem cells have gone into senescence.
Right.
Right? So wouldn't it make sense? That's why we're seeing all these bone fractures.
Yeah, that makes total sense because there's been a lot of stuff come out in the news lately that it's not really the lack of calcium.
Right? Well, computer screens changed. Yeah, it's not due to a lack of calcium.
Well, the other thing is that when you put stress on a bone, it helps it create more bone cells, like walking and exercising and stuff like that. So if you're pretty
Wolff's law.
sedentary, yeah.
Yeah, if you stress a certain part of the body, it's going to respond by building strong. Right.
Yep.
So I just wanted to put this. We were talking about olive oil, right?
Mm-hmm.
Found that if you're using extra virgin olive oil, it reduces your risk of breast cancer by 70%.
70%, but you got to get a really good one.
Yeah, extra virgin olive oil. It reduces your risk of heart disease by 31%.
Wow.
Right? And so we look at the difference between extra virgin olive oil. What they basically do is they take olives, they press them, they squeeze the oil up. You consume it. That's extra virgin olive oil. No processing.
Okay.
Then they have virgin olive oil, right? And virgin olive oil is refined olive oil, where they've done a few things to it. They've chemically processed the olive oil to get rid of the taste, to get rid of the smell, to get rid of the color, things like that. And what it does, it reduces the number of polyphenols that are in the olive oil.
Okay.
Yeah. So a 2019 study, a study that was done just last year, it said that extra virgin olive oil significantly lowers total cholesterol, blood pressure, and it increases the ratio of good fats to bad fats.
So you can cook with that, or I assume you could just like take a spoonful.
Yeah, but I always wondered, what's the difference between virgin olive oil and extra virgin olive oil? I mean, I go to the grocery store and I'm looking at these different products and I'm going, this one's on sale.
Right. I don't usually go for the sale. I go for the quality.
Well, for some of us guys, I mean, when we're doing the shopping, we're like, oh, let's see, that one's $7, this one's $20.
Yep.
Right? So this was an interesting study. This was a study just was published. So they've linked Alzheimer's disease to glucose metabolism.
Glucose metabolism.
Yeah, so sugar metabolism, right? So we're measuring the different proteins that are involved with glucose metabolism, and they're looking for a way of treating and diagnosing Alzheimer's disease really early. And so they found that this research had identified these different proteins that trigger the neuroprotective benefit of the different cells in the brain involved with these brain cells called astrocytes and microglia.
Okay.
But they looked at 3,000 different proteins, and they found that these early changes causes different activations of these microglia and these astrocytes, right? And this was a study that's funded by the National Institutes of Aging. And so if you can keep this inflammation under control in the brain, you can get these cells to protect the brain.
Okay, and we keep the inflammation under control because we can remove senescent cells now? Bingo.
Senescence. Bingo, the word pops up again. Senescence, right?
Right. And what was it? It's like we have, there's 20 different stem cells, and there's 7 of them in the brain. 7 kinds, I think. Something like
more
that.
than that.
More than
Yeah. But so they found that all of this stuff is all, there's a certain risk factor, genetic risk factor. So this is another reason to get your DNA tested for SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, and you can identify these different SNPs that are associated with Alzheimer's. And if you have that test run, you know that you really got to be careful. If you have 2 of the alleles, if you get 2 of the bad genes from your parents, you know that you really got to be careful. It's like having an owner's manual, Andrea.
Yep.
And so you want to look at that. But it helps prevent these tau and these amyloid plaques, these tangles in the brain. So I'm just, what does it have to do with everything that's happening in the world right now?
Well, I don't know how you're referring that.
Well, look what's happening in the world. COVID-19, right? We're talking about COVID-19. It seems to be affecting adversely people over the age of 50,
Right.
people with these old age diseases, right?
Their bodies are already compromised.
The body is already compromised. They've already got these old age diseases. So what these doctors, Aubrey Gray, you've heard that name before.
Yeah.
What his group is suggesting is that if we can take and we can go after these aging diseases, we can help lower the risk of adverse side effects from these pandemics, because they're suggesting that this isn't, because we live in a global world, this isn't going to be the last pandemic we're going to see. And they're saying that if you want to boost immune function, if you want to get it so that the body can respond to this favorably, treat the aging diseases. Treat the body, treat aging as if it is the disease.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times we get on here and we talk about anti-aging, and a whole lot of people have the idea that, you know, we're doing that as like, oh, we just want to look better or something like that. But really, it's not about that. It's about restoration, regeneration of cells inside your body to accomplish what you were just saying.
Health span.
Help you live healthy longer.
Health span.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the word that was coined about 5 years ago. Health span, right? Because we've seen the lifespan increase dramatically in the last 150 years, right? 150 years ago, if you lived to be 50, you were an old person.
Right.
Now, right? And what was the most common cause of death back 150 years ago? You know?
I have no idea.
Infection,
Oh, yeah.
right? Infection.
That makes sense. Yep.
So all of a sudden now, right? What are we seeing as the most common cause of disease right now?
Anything that inflammation causes.
Well, but I mean, infection is one of the right now they're saying infection. But so Andrea, let's, instead of going after increasing our lifespan, let's increase our health span. How do you increase that? That's what age reversal. That's what anti-aging. That's what this whole movement is all about.
Right. Right.
If you go on my webpage, if you jump on any of my calls that I've done in the last couple of years, it's my focus.
Right. Mine too, you know, because as I've shared before, previous to learning about reverse aging and the fact that we can do that now, I was like wanting to check out at age 75 because I seriously didn't want to live through all the pain and suffering at the end of the years. You know, it was like, just get me out of here about 75 because everybody's in pain and suffering after that. But I've totally changed my mind about that now that I can see that, you know, we have great hope for extending our health in this, at this time, you know. So, I saw somebody ask if you could actually reverse age, if you were like in your 80s, or if you had to start this when you were in your 40s to actually do it. But we have people who are in 90 taking some of the natural substances that we use for this, and they're getting results.
Yeah. Well,
Your
just
hair's
like
growing back in, things like
like
that.
the study that I just read to you, they took and they put people on these senolytic agents for 3 days, and then 11 days later, they measured their kidney function, they measured the amount of senescent cells, and it had significantly decreased. 3 days.
Boy, I would say anybody with a little bit of a kidney dysfunction there would want to give this a real shot for about 90 to 120 days and see what happens.
Right? And you can't, you know, we can't say cure or treat or anything like that. You know, all we can say is you know,
We're regenerating the body with natural substances, basically.
we're improving function. We're optimizing the function of the body. We're optimizing your body's own system. We're supporting the body's own system. I mean, we want to make sure and have that disclaimer when you're listening to this, when, you know, we're not curing disease, we're not curing diabetes, we're not curing heart disease, we're not curing cancer. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, your body is going to return to its optimum health if you do some things that well,
support it. Yeah.
yeah.
Support.
You know, folks, thanks for being with us today. I know we run overtime again. I always, you know, Andrew, I always try not to. I look at the clock.
Hey, it was really good information. I mean, people should be watching this and going with a notepad and taking notes just to get that in their brain, you know, if nothing else for a mindset change, you know, and for encouragement.
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of notes.
Yep. It was a good call, Doc. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
sharing.
everyone. You have a great day. Stay healthy, and live long and prosper, like Spock used to say.
So long. Tune in again.